Hello friends and welcome to another video lesson from DBOS Talks. If you haven't subscribed yet, please click subscribe and click the bell so that you can be notified of new uploads. This is the latest video in a playlist called Serious Fun with SQL, and here we're going to be learning how to convert a number to words in Oracle SQL. First, we must know that Oracle SQL actually already has a built-in function that does this kind of thing by treating the number value as a Julian date. Julian as in Julian calendar of Julius Caesar, the Roman emperor. Okay, so let's not go into that, just a backgrounder on what Julian means. Okay, so I'll just show you very quickly an illustration of the Oracle built-in function, which does the work of converting a number or numeral to words. So in the example, we're using the now very familiar, for those who have been following my previous videos on SQL. So you will know that the most commonly used command in SQL would be select. So here we're trying to convert the number 9876 into a word form. This is, never mind about you don't have to bother about the syntax of it, because this is not what we're going to do in this video, but I'm just showing you that Oracle already has a built-in function that will do the job for you. Okay, the J here is referring to Julian calendar, as in Julius Caesar, okay, the Roman calendar. So if I execute this, it will convert the number 9876 into words. You see here, 9876. Okay, so that's just to start on the right foot, meaning so that we're not in the dark. We know that Oracle already has a built-in function of doing this. But in this video, we will be looking at an example on how we can build our own logic that will do this thing, which is converting number to words. Okay. Before that, we can ask ourselves, what would be one application or usage of this functionality of converting number to words? And actually, one application of this, which may not be that common these days, is a bank check. Sometimes spelled like this, sorry, Q-U-E, a bank check. So in a bank check or in a check, you would see amount in numeric form, and then you see the same amount in words. So that's one application of that. If you will ask me what other applications of this, then you could think of a template or a dynamic document which can come up with a letter that may be sent out to some customers. And in that document, it would have some template forms, and one of them would be converting numbers to words. That's just okay. So those are some of the usages of this functionality. Now, before we get into the video itself on how to convert numbers to words, we can have a look also at at least two functions that were used in the example that I'll show you. One is the function called length. So the function length is used to get the length of a string of characters. When we say string, it means a bunch of letters or characters. Okay, I'll show you. The syntax for that is, in a while. The syntax is this: length, parentheses, and then the string inside of it. And here is a simple example of that. Select length of the string ABC. The string is enclosed in single quotes. And then this len here is an alias, like a nickname from dual table. In Oracle, you will use the dual table, which is already built in. If you're doing some processing, text processing, computing something, getting the date, some SQL operation wherein you're not really getting data from a table, then you will use the dual table. So if I execute this, it is supposed to return to us or display to us the length of this string. So this string ABC is composed of 3 characters. So it should return 3. Okay, so you will see it returns 3. That's the length. So that is an Oracle built-in function which we'll be using in the example that you will see in a while. Okay. The other function that I'll share with you here is the function called substring, SUBSTR, which is short for substring. Again, string is a bunch of characters that go together as one. So substring is that function gets the length. No, not the length. Substring gets a subset of a string. Of a string of characters. Subset meaning a portion of it, depending on the arguments or parameters or the options you have specified. So let's look at the syntax and some examples. So the syntax of substring is, the command is substr, short for substring, parentheses, and then the first parameter to it is the string itself, again enclosed in single quotes, comma, the starting position, meaning if it's at the beginning of the string, you could say 1, and then the length. Okay, it's the syntax. Here are 2 examples. Let's look at the string called ABCDE, not called, meaning that's the value of the string, ABCDE, enclosed in single quotes. So in this command, we wanted to return the substring, the subset of this, the portion of this, starting at position 1 with a length of 3. That means position 1 is this, but I want a length of 3, ABC. So if I execute this, I should have ABC. Okay, ABC. Here it's different. Second example, select substring ABCDE. My starting position is 3, position 3. So my starting position is ABC. This is position 3, but the length is 2. So it should return CD. And it returns CD. So now you have seen 2 Oracle built-in functions that you'll be using in the example that is to come. One is length, the other is substring. Okay. Now let's get on with the function. Okay, in Oracle, as well as other flavors of SQL, you will come up with these 2 constructs, or whatever you may want to call it. Function and procedure. If you are familiar with Java, then you would know something called methods or method. And a method would come in 2 forms. It's like a procedure, it's like a function. Okay, sometimes it doesn't return something, that's called void, and sometimes it returns something. Okay, so in SQL, you have procedure and function. To put it simply, a procedure will perform some logic, but will not necessarily return something. It may or may not, depending on how you have defined it. But a function will perform some logic, and at the same time, at the end, it will return something, a value. Okay, so in this example, I created a function. I've simply called it num towards. You don't have to worry about the whole set of logic. The thing to understand is how I approached creating this function. It's not a full-blown number to word conversion, but something that will at least see you how this was done. If you look at the numbers that we are using, you will notice that how we convert them to words, how we read the number is, we also notice that we actually separate the numbers by threes, starting from the rightmost, isn't it? So we start from the rightmost, you mark 3, put a comma. If you were in Europe, you would use I think a point, a decimal point. So I'm using the convention of the American way. So to separate the 3 digits from the right, you use a comma. Okay, so I will use the same way here. That is the approach of how, that is the consideration or the assumption. In fact, it's a fact that this is how numbers are grouped together, and that's how they are read. So if you look at this, I will also, you can see there's a grouping of 3 digits, isn't it? So I will also look how we read the number. Look at this example, 500. If I will read this number, I will say 567. So what I'm saying is this: I will not just simply convert this into this 5, 6, 7. You very well know that this number over here is not read as 567. You know that. So there is some kind of structure behind it, which is not simply like this. It's not cut and dry. So you say 567, right? You don't say 567 unless you're rushing, you're talking about the digits. It's another point. But if you look, again, the numbers are being grouped into 3 digits, starting from the right, going to the left. And then you can also see that there are at least 3 scenarios of naming the numbers. Example, sometimes the numbers are, so in this case, it should be 567. This is 567. So now you can see it's not as straightforward translating this into 567, as we already know. So there are 3 scenarios that I can see here. One is sometimes the number or the numeral is simply translated as its straightforward word like 7. In this case, it is just 7. Sometimes it is the middle. If you look at the middle, if you look at the 3, the middle expression, I mean digit, will translate into something like 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. So I have that here, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. And if you look at the last 2 digits, this will come in 2 forms. If this middle digit is a 1, then this is read differently. I will not say 517. This becomes 17. It's a different word altogether. So that's handled over here. So I'm saying there are at least 3 scenarios of naming the words, the numbers, converting from number to word. Again, if you remember at the beginning of the video, near the beginning of the video, I showed you 2 Oracle built-in functions that we'll be using here. One is the substring, which returns a subset of a string. A string is a bunch of characters that go together as one. So we're using substring here. If you remember the syntax, substring, the string, in this case, this is a variable, starting point, and then the length. We also used the length function over here, which simply returns the length of a string. Again, a string is a bunch of characters that go together as one. Okay, other than that, we will be using a couple of if statements. conditional statements in SQL, which is also something ever present in other programming languages, Java and others. C is all there. So we have if, it goes with a then. So if, and then you have a condition. If a condition is true, then it will do this. Okay. So this is, if you look at the typical structure of a PL SQL code, I don't have the time to go through all of this right now. This will be a video more on the converting numbers to words. But if you will have a look at it, you have here the create statement of, in this case, function. Okay, here is a variable declaration section. You are declaring some variables that you want to use. A variable is something that will holds a value, and being a variable, its value may change. Here you have a procedure, but this procedure, if you look at the level, this is under the same level as the variables. So it is also being declared as a local procedure, something internal to this function. Okay. And then you have the begin. This is where the executables start. So from this point onwards is the executable part. Okay, so again, we used length, we use substring. Those are some of the functions, at least the two functions used in this function. Okay, don't be confused. This whole thing is a function which I created, and yet inside of it, I'm using Oracle built-in functions such as length and substring. Okay, so let's get right on with it. Like I told you, I see three scenarios of how to name words. One is when it goes in pairs of starting with 1. I mean, if you look at a group of 3 digits, when the middle digit is a 1, then it gives a different complexion to the word. It becomes 17. You don't call it 517. As against, let's say, if this were a 2, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, then it would have the pattern of 20, 30, 40, a different pattern altogether. Okay, so let's get on with the examples. So again, if you remember at the beginning of the video, I showed you that there is already, in fact, an Oracle built-in function that does the feature of, if you have the requirement to convert a number to words, is already, it can be done with an Oracle built-in function. So I'm just showing you how it can be done manually in case you wanted to practice your SQL skills. So let's say I have here a couple of test cases, not too complicated, but just so you get the feel of what kind of tests you can do on this kind of program or script or procedure or function. Okay, so the first case I have is converting a 1-digit number into words. So select num to words. This is the name of the function which I created, which is this. This is a function, num to words. So this is the syntax or format of calling a function in Oracle or even in other flavors of SQL. So select, this is the function name. This is your parameter. So if you look at the function I created, it has one parameter called, I will call it pnum, which is in, meaning input, and the type is varchar2. So it has one parameter. So again, select function name, the parameter. This is just an alias, like a nickname, from dual. You already heard earlier my explanation of what a dual table is. Okay, so if I execute this, this will convert the numeral 7, the string, into the word 7. So here it is, 7. Okay, the second example is a string that starts with 0. So for us humans, this is straightforward, easy peasy. But for a machine, for a software, you have to give it some intelligence to be able to process this. Otherwise, a program might say this is 007, which is not what we expect, right? So if I execute this, it should be able to handle it also correctly, if the logic is correct. So it is also interpreted and converted correctly as 7. Even though they look different, again, for a human being, this would be very, it's a piece of cake to read this. You know that this is 7, you know that this is 007, but you know that numerically, the leading zeros count to nothing. So it's just 7. Even if you try to enter this into a calculator, you try entering 007, again, it will eventually just display 7 because the calculator has that arithmetic logic which processes this and understands that this is just 7. Okay, so correctly, it has been converted to the word 7. Let's look at an example. A string that ends with 0. Again, for us, it's just easy, but for a program, for a script, for a logic, you have to give it the logic to process this correctly. So the test case is a number which ends with 0. Okay, so 510 is translated or converted as correctly as 510. Next test case we have is a string that starts and ends with 0. Again, for us, it's quite easy, but for a piece of code, it has to be handled correctly because it might be read converted as 010 or 010. But we know that it's just 10. Okay. The next case is the string starts with 0 and the second digit is 1. I'm mentioning this, the second digit is 1 because if you remember the scenario I've shown earlier, the presence of 1 as the second digit gives it a different complexion because it will be read differently now. As against if this were 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, you would have the pattern of calling it 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, etc. But with the 1 in the middle, it would be read differently, 11 up to 19. So I'll execute this, and it's 16. The next is the value is just 100. Okay, 100. The next is it's a value more than 100, greater than 100. So it correctly says 487. We also have here another one, 711. Okay, so we can see that the logic is working correctly as expected, converting the numerals, the numbers, into words. If we go back to the function, again, this is a function, it is a piece of PL/SQL code or SQL code which executes some logic, and at the same time it returns a value. In this case, the value being returned is this one, which is of the varchar2 data type character. Okay, it says here, this is the declaration of, the create statement of the function. So it returns varchar2, which is the value being returned to us, given back to us. Again, there is a variable declaration over here, this section. And under that, we have this procedure, which is simply, I just call it get word 1 or 3. What I mean by that is that if you look at a 3-digit number, this is 2. Simply put, if we translate it simply, this is 2, 3, 4. But the one in the middle will not become 3, it will become something like 34, in this case 30. So this procedure, get word 1, word 3, is trying to convert the first digit or the third digit, trying to get this 2, 4. So if you look at the if statement, if the value I'm passing is 0, the word returned for that is null, meaning null means nothing in Oracle or in other SQL flavors. Meaning if this were 0, I will not say 034, null. Null means nothing, so I will just say 34. That's the meaning of this null. If it's some other value 1, then it's plain and simple 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, and so on up to 9. If it is a 9, then I will say 9 for this. See, if with this example 934, I would say this is 934, meaning I would return the value of 9 here, the word, and here the word 4. And since this is this place over here at the hundreds, I will just append the word called 100. So I know it will be messy to discuss this in this short video, but I'm just saying you the learning points over here is that Oracle and probably the other SQL flavors, but at least Oracle has already a built-in function which converts number to words. That's the thing that you must take note. This video is simply to show you, to give you a practice of how to do it yourself also. In this specific function which I created, I have shown you that we have used at least 2 functions, Oracle built-in functions. One is called length, which computes or returns the length of a string. A string is a bunch of characters which go together as one. And the second function I used is substring, which returns a subset of a string. Okay, and we did a lot of if conditions, if statements over here to process, because I see 3 different scenarios of naming or converting a word. One is the straightforward conversion of a numeral into its word equivalent, 1 to 1, 2 to 2, 3 to 3. The other is when the middle digit of a trio is a 1, then it gives a different complexion, which if it's 1, 1 is 11 all the way to 19. Other than that, it would be of this pattern. 2 is 20, 3 is 30. Okay, and we have seen, okay, you have seen that. So at the end, I am using this. This is by no means a sophisticated piece of code. It is simplistic, not so sophisticated, just showing you a couple of elements, a couple of things that you could learn about SQL, about Oracle SQL specifically. And at the last 2 lines, last few lines, you have this. Since this is a function, there's a function here, it returns something. So at the very end, it will return something, which is a varchar2 type, which is declared somewhere at the top. So this is the variable name being returned. This takes its value from this over here, which is saying vnum in words equals a concatenation of these 3 variable values. This symbol over here, sometimes called the double pipe. This single vertical bar is called a pipe. So double pipe. This represents a concatenation or like joining. Think of it as a glue, joining the values of these 3 variables. Okay, so we have seen the multiple scenarios over here, seeing the function in action and correctly returning us the value, converting the number into words. Okay, I hope you've learned a couple of things. I know it's a bit messy because I cannot possibly walk you through the whole thing with a crystal clear manner, because with this very limited time. But just to give you a couple of learning points, a couple of nuggets on what are the possible functions you could use in such a scenario, such a requirement. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And I hope to see you in the next video. Please don't forget to subscribe. Thanks.